Hi, let's talk about the books I read in July. The first book I read was Heart of Thorns by Bree Barton. This was actually a reread for me because the series is finished and I'd still only read the first book. So in preparation, reread, and I still liked it. I liked it better the first time. That usually is the case with rereads for me. So I gave this a 4-star. There was some really beautiful writing in here, but it was kind of like here and there. There was this small passage about how something spoke volumes. It spoke like shelves of libraries. So it's a high fantasy, and in this world, women are the only people that hold magic. And because of this, there are lots of laws in place and men are really afraid, so all women have to wear gloves, like at all times, because how they can use magic is by touch, like a skin-to-skin contact. And so there's all these kind of scary stories about, oh, they're demons, they can stop your heart, they can do this, they can do that. And our character is the daughter of a hunter of these witches, a Gwirak. It's about unraveling that magic, it's about learning about their mother who passed away. There's also some political intrigue in here. There's some romance, which I don't think is the strongest part of it. I don't mind it, but I'm not going crazy over it. Correlation between magic springing from a need to defend ourselves. So as women, they can unblood people, which is literally just kind of like take the blood from parts of their body, so that can save them from being raped. And so there is a bit of like discussion about like sexual assault in these books, so just be aware, especially in the second one. The ending I didn't find as surprising, no duh, but I did kind of see, it was great to see the foreshadowing, having already read it. So the next thing I read was, can you see this? Yes. I read Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine by Gail Honeyman. This is a contemporary literary fiction. I really enjoyed this. I gave it 4 stars, and in this we follow Eleanor Oliphant, who, despite the title, is not completely fine. And so this book is just like a really interesting character study. We find out why Eleanor's lived a very kind of sheltered life, and so there's a lot of culture shock going on. And while I found it amusing, I just kind of found it hard to believe that she could be so sheltered as an adult woman that owns a TV, you know? And like her lack of awareness of other people. We kind of go into that and why she is the way she is. Also, there's a trigger warning for attempted suicide in this. I did not know that going in, so now you know that. That was a very difficult part to read. There was like a dash of romance in this, but I'm glad it wasn't the focus of this, because Eleanor is not in a state to embark on a relationship, so I'm glad they didn't kind of force that in there, because she just really needed a friend and that's what she got. But also I kind of just wish there was no undertones of romance. I wasn't a fan of the twist at the end. I just felt like it cheapened, but I can also see how that was there to illustrate, like further illustrate the character's state, but I'm still not the biggest fan of it. Next, I read Tears of Frost by Bree Barton, which is the sequel to Heart of Thorns. I got this from the library. I rated this one a 3-star. I still enjoyed it. It did take a different turn from the first book, which is good, but I don't know, just it didn't have the same tone that I enjoyed as much in the first one. This one definitely does go a bit darker. We have multiple perspectives in this one, where before it was pretty much just from our main character, Mia. There was some character stuff that just didn't feel fleshed out and didn't feel consistent for me. So we have like our main villain, and I feel like we tried to go into why they are the way they are, and it just still didn't feel right. And there were just lots of disappointing moments, but I wasn't mad at all of them. There are some interactions where it had been built up for a while, and then when we got there it was so not what we wanted. And so it was heartbreaking, but I think that ultimately was strong for the story, but the backstory for that didn't make the most sense. We do get to see different approaches to magic in this one and some different communities in different parts of the world, which was really interesting. I'd be really fascinated to find out if they are inspired by real world cultures. This is a book of a lot of just characters struggling, but they kind of turned one of the characters into a villain at the end that I was like, why? So I feel like we got a bit lost with this book. I liked some of what it did. It did some unexpected relationship. Next thing I read was also from the library. I read Kate in Waiting by Becky Albertalli. I was really excited about this because it's about drama kids and I'm a drama kid, and I only gave it 2 stars because it was just really disappointing. I think it's partly that I'm just not the demographic age. So this book felt really whiny and dumb to me. I understand they're not going to be thinking rationally and they don't have life experience to understand these things. I didn't, but it was just like too much. And I feel like a lot of the theatre stuff was kind of glossed over, or different terminology than what I know, which might just be an America-Australia thing. But it just was like, it was mainly just about relationship drama. It was quite readable though, like it was pretty fast paced. It's a pretty short book, so we'll give it that. I read An Ideal Husband by Oscar Wilde. I don't know why my brain just blanked today. I gave it 4 stars. I just thought it was so funny and witty. The main action drama of this is that we have a couple and the wife is like, husband, you're just the ideal. An ideal husband, you're just perfect. And then we find out from another character that comes in that he is harbouring a secret and that he became rich from unsavoury means and he's being blackmailed. Silliness ensues. Some funny side characters. I love the dramatic irony at points. My favourite characters were Mrs. Chevley and Lord Goring. So Mrs. Chevley is the lady that comes in to do the blackmailing, and she's actually the ex-lover of Goring, and they're both just very kind of cheeky and fun. Goring more so cheeky, and Mrs. Chevley's more just like sassy badass, telling it how it is. The next thing I read was The Midnight Library by Matt Haig, which was a Goodreads Choice winner and has had so many good reviews. And I'm going to add to those good reviews. I gave this book 5 stars. I will warn you, there is attempted suicide trigger warning, because apparently all uplifting stories have to have suicide, because we have to take our characters to our lowest so they can get to their highest. Apparently. I just found it was so bittersweet and altogether heartwarming and endearing. I really enjoyed it. In this book we follow a character and she ends up in limbo, which happens to be this library, and she finds out that she is given a second chance at life if she goes back and makes a different choice and see where her life would have ended up. And so we follow her jumping in, and the lives she thought would have been good turn out not to be so great. And so it kind of helps erase the regrets she's had over the years. It was really great that we got to see so many lives in there, and it didn't feel repetitive because each one was quite different, and we did get to a point where it was a montage of what lives she was living. Yeah, like for example, this is just like a tiny quote I saved, which was like, in one life she only ate toast. There were a lot of profound, beautiful quotes in here. Also, I think why I enjoyed this so much was that I read it at the right time. Like, I'm feeling a bit adrift in the world and a bit lost, so to have that bring back just perspective and how the little things can count, and that it's not worth getting caught up in regrets and just moving forward always. Give me a second. This one's quite the title. 2 20-somethings decide to never be stressed about anything ever again. Ever. Which was a play I read. It was really funny. I don't think this is actually officially published from what I could tell looking online. It's basically what the title says. It's this couple, they decide to do all kind of newfangled things to be less stressed, and it's just hilarious. 4 stars. After that I read another play which was Goodbye Charles. I only gave it 2 stars. I didn't really agree with like the moral of the story. Like, we kind of jump between past and present, but the main theme and focus is about commitment in relationships, And we're kind of left with some people just aren't built for commitment. Almost in like a disease way. They're like, see what happens when you try to make people commit bad things. Okay, I understand that people are different, but it just kind of felt preachy and didn't make the most sense unless it was trying to be a bit ironic. It's like rain. It did have an interesting style of having characters pop in and out. So the main format is people sitting and having coffee, and as they're telling the story, they're kind of popping in to talk to the person and then back to them. They're kind of having two conversations at once. But it still makes sense. I'm making it sound confusing. Next, I read Vicious by V.E. Schwab finally. This was one of my top books I wanted to get to this year, so I'm really glad I did. I picked this up during Mel Reed's 24-hour readathon. And I didn't finish it, but this was like cocaine. This was crack to me. This is book crack. I just picked it up and I just was like, oh my god, I'm reading this so fast. It's so good. And I'm so glad the hype was right and that I wasn't too late. Because sometimes with the hype train, you can miss the hype train. You're like, oh, well, there are newer, better books that this is shit now. My taste has changed enough that this is not for me anymore. But I really enjoyed this. I'm glad this was my first V.E. Schwab adult book. I've read The Archived and The Unbound, and they were like interesting, but I feel like that's a different ballpark as well. I think I'll pick up Vengeful next, but also I'm really excited about Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, because now I know that I like this writing and I know I like that concept, so I think I'm going to just froth it. I'm gonna froth it. I do kind of wish I had the prettier cover of this, but it's fine. I really liked the exploration of morality in this and how the bad guy doesn't think they're the bad guy, and how that goes both ways for the main characters who are in this. Like, no one in this book is perfectly innocent. And yet I'm still rooting for them. Sometimes. It's very complicated. I thought the ending was fantastic. I also thought there was just the right amount of world building in this one where we didn't get dumped all at once, and even so we don't know every single thing there is to know at the end of this, but it was just enough to leave me wanting more and for me to understand. Okay, and the last book I finished was The Odyssey by Homer. My plan was to finish reading this before I was in the Penelopead. That did not happen because it was slow and dry and I was struggling. I audiobooked most of this, and I found when I audiobooked and didn't read along, which was most of the time, it was just not really penetrating. I just glossed over, like I couldn't tell you exactly what happened. But it's also because it is like an oral history, like it's not meant to be read, and it is old, that there is just like a lot of over-explaining and overly talking before actually doing things. Yeah, I gave it a 2-star. Like, it was okay. Like, it's not terrible, but I'm like, look, I'm not that much of a literature nerd that I was like, oh yes, genius. That is it. I am currently reading A Kingdom of Flesh and Fire by Jennifer L. Armentrout. I've only got like 50 pages left. And I'm also reading Ariadne by Jennifer Saint. I'm loving this so far. I zoomed through most of this in a day, so I'm gonna finish this soon. Let me know your thoughts on any of these books, and I'll see you next time. Ciao.